Well, good evening, folks. Welcome back to the farm. Yes, we're still here. We didn't blow away despite Hurricane Wilma coming through here last night. So if you didn't know, if you didn't catch the previous video, we had a severe winter storm blow through, but it didn't do what a typical winter storm would do and bring snow and ice and all that stuff. It actually brought incredibly warm weather, but a 90-mile-an-hour wind. And so we were fortunate. We didn't lose the shop roof, we didn't lose the house roof, the greenhouse, the horse shelters, everything like that was actually intact this morning. The biggest things that moved around is actually we had one of our chemical totes, the big 1 cube totes, tipped over and skidded across the yard, and I was able to drag that back and put it back where it was supposed to be. And a couple of wheelbarrows that, were tucked nicely away against the grain shed and the sea can suddenly relocated themselves to the middle of the yard, so they got to get put away. But all in all, as far as infrastructure wise, we got off like unscathed, so that's really good. We did lose probably about $100 worth of hay in terms of, so we got hay bales, we got 4 hay bales throughout the farmyard. We got 1 on either side of the shop for the 2 flocks of sheep back here. We've got 1 over on the east side of the yard for the horses, and 1 over on the southeast side of the yard for our lambs, in a 90-mile-an-hour wind and an open bale. I mean, that's just like, it's like the theme song from Pocahontas, right? Can you paint with all the colors of the wind? It's just, the hay is just blowing across the yard. And so, well, whatever. What do you do? That stuff's gone now. And, well, just eating our lunch. But anyways, that doesn't matter. 5 o'clock this morning, I came out, did the mad scramble, figured out, okay, where's everything at? And then looked at our square bale stash. So we got a hay wagon full of square bales, and it's all tarped in, protected from the elements. And there's been a couple times we had some pretty big windstorms, and it's really put some strain on that tarp. Well, here last night, it actually broke the ropes that were holding that tarp down, but I've actually got wooden beams sitting on top of the tarp to kind of also keep that held in place. It even lifted some of those wooden beams off because of all the, obviously, parachute pressure underneath that tarp. Lifted those wooden beams off and tossed them on the ground. So I come out at 5 o'clock this morning, and I'm just like, what do we do? So mad scramble, panic, get all the wooden beams back on, ratchet strap everything back down, and then here this evening I found where all the ropes had broke and tried to retie everything back up. So the square hay bales are back and secure again. And that brings me to today's question of the day. Well, I don't usually have a question of the day. I make it a bit more of it than it needs to be, but my buddy Mike over in Edson had a question there today that I thought would be kind of interesting to answer. And maybe you want to hear the answer to it, or maybe you want to hear the question. But so he asked me, he said, do you ever use one of those net things for hay for horses? And yeah, actually we do. We have a hay net that fits over a, well, I wouldn't say a 6-foot bale. It's meant for a 6-foot bale, but on a 6-foot bale, it's really, really tight. It works better on a 5-foot bale or really heavy 5-foot bale. But so when we first started here, we were just, on a peasant's mission using the old pitchfork. And well, you'll have seen in recent videos, we have returned to this method of doing things. And well, some of that's by choice and some of that's by obligation. So in the early years, we didn't have a hay net. We just had the pitchfork, and away you go, 2-3 times a day kind of thing, give the horses their ration. And yeah, pretty quickly you realize, okay, well, what's your time worth? And what value are these horses returning to the farm, other than, I mean, you have some lawn ornaments that generally move around. But unless you're, working horses or anything like that, or they're able to generate some kind of revenue, then you're just doing a lot more work for what, right? So we bought this hay net. And actually the first thing after we realized that we're on a peasant's mission forking this hay over was just put a hay bale out there. And I think it was about, well, it was just over 48 hours, and they had a 1,500 pound hay bale. Like, it looked like a green carpet across the whole field. It was just strewn about, trodden on, peed on, pooped on, and it was totally doing the colors of the wind. And what a wasted venture that was. Now, when hay was $30 a bale, that's one thing. But, you know, very quickly hay went up to like $50 or $60 a bale. And it's like, oh yeah, you know what, I gotta be a little more conscientious about this. And we hadn't purchased a hay net initially because I think at the time they were, I mean, they're not cheap, right? They were a couple $100. So I bought one for my wife for Christmas, and then we went out and used it. And okay, suddenly the hay bale that could last 48 hours, if it was just a complete, you know, Asian buffet kind of thing, could now last, you know, in excess of 2 weeks, right? So the thing with the thing with the hay net is it still allows them to graze continuously, but it just limits how easy it is to get that bite and how much they can get in a bite. So they'll stay there at the hay bale all day long and graze, and they can still get super fat and poorly conditioned. However, if you give them all the feed they need with the old pitchfork and keep them in really good condition, you're probably actually going to burn, and I say burn because that's the colloquial term, the hay burners. You'll burn a lot less hay and still keep them in good shape if you're just forking over the hay they need. So is the hay net a good buy? Well, yeah, okay, it's gonna be more economical for you to have a hay net in terms of as opposed to a free-for-all. It's gonna be more economical for you to do that as opposed to have to go out there and do this 2 or 3 times a day if you've got nothing better to do with your time that can return real value to your farm. And really why we've returned to it this year over the hay net, you know, going back to pitchforking, is really due to a hay shortage. So the hay we have, you know, we've got a very specific calculated number that had nothing to do with half of a hay bale blowing across the field in the wind, by the way. But we've got a pretty good number of what hay should be consumed on the farm this winter. And so we want to reduce that waste and not let the horses get super fat and, you know, come February or March, be completely out of hay. I don't know what kind of shenanigans are going on out there. I better go check. All right, well, that looks like it was just the dogs chasing the cats around the yard. Unnecessary shenanigans. But where was I? Hay net, yes. We moved away from the hay net this year. Hay shortage, not really very efficient because it still allows them to eat pretty much as they want. They can sit there at the all-you-can-eat buffet all day long. So then we are now rationing back to the pitchfork. Now, we're also doing that with the sheep. We have a V feeder that we built out of some IBC totes, you'll recall from earlier videos this year. And we're rationing the hay that way, as opposed to, again, just a complete free-for-all. And that's working quite well. Previous versions that I tried to make of a V feeder with a pallet were very ineffective. We tried to do stuff with panels. We tried to do stuff with mesh. It was a complete gong show. The V feeder, 100%. If you're forking hay with a pitchfork, V feeder with an IBC tote, that's the way to go. Trust me, I spent a lot of time on the backside of a pitchfork, and that is undeniably the best way to go. Now, can I go to the next level and use a hay net for my sheep or for my goats? Well, here's the thing. If I've got, let's get a little piece of hay here, right? So if I've got a piece of hay here and I'm a sheep, and I see that piece of hay, I want to eat that piece of hay, but then maybe there's a piece of hay up there that I want. So then I stand up on this. I stand up and I'm trying to get that other piece of hay up there. Now, with a V feeder, they can't do that. They can't, because it goes inwards, right? So they can't get there's nothing for them to get their feet on. It's just not designed that way. So it prevents them from doing that. With a hay net around a big round bale or something like that, there's totally space for them to get their feet up on there and get to wherever they want to be. And then when they don't want to be there anymore, they go to push off, and where do their feet go? Well, they've got tiny little feet about this big around. They'll go right through the net, and chances are gravity's going to do what gravity's going to do, and they'll be stuck there. Now, notwithstanding the fact that I fully expect somebody's going to watch this video and say, well, you know what, I feed my sheep or I feed my goats with a hay net, and I've never had an issue, and they won't do that. I will say if that's been your experience, there's one of three things going on there. Because it's a guarantee that a sheep or a goat will get its leg stuck in a hay net, and they will most likely either break their leg or die from the stress of being hung up in that net. And if so, that hasn't been your experience, one of three things is happening. Either you're super, super lucky in terms of, it's gonna happen, it just hasn't happened yet. Or it's happened, and somehow the universe, with the rotation of the earth or what, Coriolis effect, that animal has been able to free itself, and you just haven't observed it happening. It's happening, but you just haven't seen it yet, and eventually you're gonna come out there and there's gonna be a dead goat or a dead sheep hung up in a net like a dolphin. It's gonna be tragic. And the third reason why this may not be happening to you is because, in fact, you don't even have sheep or goats. You're in fact raising unicorns, and you're just oblivious because the universe doesn't work that way. Anyway, so that's why we don't use the hay net for the sheep here. That's not to say that you can't use a hay net for a sheep or a goat, but it does have to be used in a certain application. So as I said, we have small V feeders that we built out of IBC totes. If you have a large V feeder or a hoop style, it's like a semicircle that sits sits above the shoulder height of the animal. So you got your piece of hay now, and the feed is up here, and the animal has to go up, but it can't get its feet up onto that net. That may be an effective method actually to reduce the amount of consumption, the amount of waste that you see from your animals. But then you also need to have a large V feeder, which costs a lot of money, and a large hay net, which also costs a lot of money. Plus you need handling equipment to be able to move those big bales and stuff around, which, as you all know, costs money too. So sometimes the more simple method, the old tried and true pitchfork, doesn't seem so bad. Anyways, that's all the wisdom I have to share for today. I hope you have a fantastic evening. I'm going to go for a cup of tea, and we will see you tomorrow.